we are never truly lost. Well, okay, sure, maybe we get turned around for a few days in the woods, where life just feels like it's getting the best of us, and everything's going wrong. And I'm like Martin, and I've stood right where you're standing, lost, beaten down, like nothing's ever gonna change. And that's why I built this camp. And that's why I'm inviting you to join me and all the members of this wild community. Because you know what, friend? It does get better. So come along with me into the wild and let me show you this awesome, unique skill set that lays within inside of you. With help from the land, we're going to unlock the steward that's inside each and every one of us that will lead the way out of the darkness and into healing. Here at the Camp of Healing on Project Mindfully Outdoors. Welcome to the Campfire.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is kind of a unique arena for me. I don't really get into I don't get the chance to really talk to too many children authors, but I think this is going to be fun because I think this is going to really benefit everybody.
Yes, the themes are very applicable.
I'm kind of curious, where did you, or what sparked your interest in writing children's books?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm an adoptive mom. So after the end of my corporate career, I decided that I had a little bit more to say, and I wanted to speak to those parents that were perhaps having some difficulties with their blended family. So I think my books are quite unique in that the topics are appropriate for children that are in families due to adoption, foster care, or stepchildren because of divorce and remarriage. So it's a topic that a lot of families can benefit from.
They can, because I think, as we've grown up, we were kind of like the first real generation that actually was like a living experiment of blended families. As our parents, had us and then got into different relationships, they had to figure that out. We were kind of in the middle of them figuring that out in real time.
That's right.
And, now we're standing here in the same situations where we're trying to blend families and we're trying to make the most of it and not reenact some of those traumas that we may have experienced as kids. So being able to find some sort of reference point is a really huge benefit.
Yeah, and there are a lot of mixed messages, especially as it pertains to adoption. Many of my friends and neighbors and family said repeatedly, "Oh, she's so lucky. She's so lucky to be adopted by you." But this was an international adoption. We adopted my daughter at age almost 7 from Mexico. And so she had lived almost 7 years somewhere else. And at the time, I really didn't appreciate all that she had lost, all with that trauma, all that trauma. She literally was, going to sleep one night in Mexico and then the next day waking up in suburbia, USA. And she lost her language, her culture, her food, her caregivers, sights and sounds and feelings, and it was really traumatic. And so in contemplating and thinking about all that later, I decided to write children's books to encourage that conversation with children and parents.
That's a conversation that I feel really gets overlooked because number one, it's very uncomfortable. For number two,
it's just something that in our day-to-day lives, as we get so caught up in the rat race, we don't put a lot of thought into. So I really appreciate that avenue.
Well, it's more than that too, because the um, the child has fears that if raising issues about their biological roots or their culture, who do I look like? Where did I come from? That prompts the fear of abandonment by the love that they're feeling with their new family. And again, with my books, what I'm trying to do is encourage that conversation and just say to parents and children that it's totally normal and actually wonderful that they're asking these questions or thinking that these thoughts. And that will go a long way to address trauma and questions later in life. The more open we are to these types of communications, the better it is for blended families, and they'll thrive because of it.
So walk me through that process a little bit, because I think it's a really good roadmap for a lot of people to actually hear how that experience worked out for you.
Well, we adopted our daughter at age almost 7, and we had a biological child at 8, 9 years old. And so there were a lot of adjustments for our family to make. And and we as a family were thinking that exactly what we were being told, that we were so she was so lucky to have us as a family. So at the time, I really didn't appreciate the trauma that she was experiencing, and it really took years. She did cry for a number of months, realizing that she was in the US to stay. And and we worked it through with the help of therapists and a wonderful community of friends and family. But the transition, I'll say, took years and years and years. I mean, this is something that she lost her language. It took a while for her to eat other types of foods. And so it really was a gradual process that we worked on together with, as I said, a network of friends and family, and also professionals. I wanted to give her the space and the opportunity to speak to others apart from us. I mean, we as parents did not have all the answers, and we had some very wonderful, help along the way.
I feel like the not having the answers, that's the part that a lot of people get caught up on. Because yeah, it's a traumatic experience for the child, but it's also can be a traumatic experience for the parent as well. There can be a lot of conflict going on, and then you're left scratching your head. How do I get from point A to point B? And you mentioned it a little bit, the idea of getting professional help. But I think that takes a little bit of putting ego aside and really being honest with yourself about the situation.
Yeah, we sought help, and as she grew and her needs and problems changed, we sought other help. But initially we had a play therapist that was great. Our daughters were so young, and it really helped us communicate as a family. But that's not the same thing that we were confronting when she was a teenager. So we were able to switch gears and seek out appropriate help during that time. So you're right. It really does take. You have to really be paying attention to what your kids are thinking and feeling, and what their needs are, and not be hung up about getting professional help, because it really was a benefit.
It's a benefit, and then on top of that, it's okay to reach out and actually seek out that help. But I feel like, at times we think we have all the answers. So
Yeah.
it gets back to the idea of putting ego aside, which can be a difficult thing. Talk to me a little bit about, what that process might have looked like for you in the early stages of actually getting help.
Well, yeah. No, it was a gradual process. And my girls now are 29 and 30 years old. So they're older, but think back to that point in our world, and there, there was no internet, and just the the common knowledge, just everything that was being talked about in terms of adoption is nowhere near as open as it is right now. So I began, well, first of all, I was observant and seeing her behavior, which as a result of trauma, kind of manifests itself in a number of ways. You just see, she was always close to temper tantrums and, very sad at some points, separate disassociation, separating herself from the family. And so these things, I always thought we were just around the corner from them ending, and they never seemed to end. So I knew that we had to take another tact or think of the process a little bit differently. It wasn't that I knew that we loved her and she loved us, but she had to work through these things. And I wanted to give her the space to say those things and feel those things. That's really what it came down to. But just being observant and knowing what you're looking for and doing your research and then connecting with the right people were all very important.
The power of observation, I found, is something that it goes beyond words to explain just how powerful it is. Whether you're dealing with family life, your work life, or, getting out in the outdoors, you can actually learn so much more by sitting down, being still, building these mindfulness practices as we're working our way down those kind of trails. And the benefit, it, it shows within really every aspect of the circle. So if you start with observation, everything is going to become more open and more clear
Yes.
to you if you're willing to open your heart and accept those answers as well.
And that's one of the things I cover in my books, because in all of my books, the situations that I have illustrated and the problems and the resolution all came from our exact family experience. So I think I have a lot of reviews that say that the experience, of course, resonated with many families. And it's, again, as you just said, it's important to just be open to seeing what you need to see when your child is acting in a certain way or experiencing problems at school. One of the books called Carla the Conqueror, and this is about the 3-book series that I have is about Carla, who is adopted from Colombia, because I couldn't write any more about my daughter because she was going to strangle me if I wrote any more about her. So I started to write about this other little girl, and she's asked to read out loud to her class. And this was a situation where what happened to my daughter was that she was just petrified. And she actually ended up crawling underneath her desk and just, refusing to do it because she was so anxious about speaking English. She had practiced, and she was in school for a number of months before this happened. But we just don't know the level of anxiety that our children have over, seemingly easy tasks. And also in one of the other books, something that was, hurtful, but we understood where it was coming from. My daughter said to my husband or to me, you're not my real mother. You're not my real father. And, parents have to be prepared to hear that and understand where it's coming from. I took things very personally during this time. And again, my hope is that with my books, parents understand that this is the trauma speaking to you as parents, not not really the child, and it's our job to help that kid, understand and just become acclimated uh, to their new family.
As I'm thinking this through and listening, I really appreciate the fact that through the books, it becomes something you can sit down and actually share with the child, read together, walk through it,
Yes.
and start to change their vocabulary, give them a little bit better of an understanding of the fact that you're trying to figure these things out and navigate them in real time based off of the environment
Mhm.
that you're sitting in. And and I think about some of the situations that I've experienced in my life. Having that reference point that you can share and build together is a very, very powerful tool, but it's also, I think, a very firm foundation for building a healthy relationship with, in the context of whether it's an adoption or even just, your natural born child.
Yes, because the child is thinking and feeling things that maybe they're afraid to raise. So one of the phrases that I really took to heart was that all the love in the world, the love of the adoptive family, does not really erase the pain of the family that's unknown to them. So think about if you didn't know who your birth parents were, or where you came from, or your story of adoption. So that was really kind of the thought behind my most recent book, where the kid that Grace meets is adopted, and he's searching for his birth mother. His parents thought that they were doing him a favor, having this adoption be private and secret, just to spare him the details. But children want to know the details. Children want to know their backstory, and where they came from, and why adoption? Uh, why did they end up in the family that they are now? Not that they don't love each other, and for many families that's exactly the case, but children need to know the entire story. So that's what the book is dedicated to: adoptees knowing their story.
That's something that, I think about in the context that as we go through life, we kind of like to throw sand over the past, which may not be fair in the long run. And regardless of the fact, when you get to different stages in your life, you start looking back and trying to figure out where you came from, you trace your origin story. It brings you full circle back around to where you're standing when you begin that exploration, and understanding that you still have the opportunity to write the rest of the story. Whether or not you have blanks in the past doesn't define where you're going. And that's something that, I tell my children all the time, even though, they know where they're coming from and everything, all of that stuff from the past, it doesn't hold you back. You still have the opportunity to go out and live. And I think that's something that along the course of, you know, filling in those gaps and trying to grow and blend together is very important to highlight.
So yeah, what you said is so very important. It's not a matter of I've heard a lot of comments online and whatnot, and people say, oh, adoptees should just get over it and move on, and move on from this experience and not dwell on the past. Well, but what you said is so very important. It's not really a matter of moving on, it's a matter of moving forward. So you know your past and you're able to move forward. So with that knowledge, children are able to move forward much more successfully, and not, again, there's pain in not knowing your story, where you came from, what happened, what are your circumstances. So it's not a matter of just moving on, but just moving forward in these kinds of discussions, and open adoptions and full disclosure of records, having states, many of the states, some states still confidential private records. So it's really a matter of getting to a point where we can disclose as much as we can to these children, and that really sets the stage for their success, later in life.
So I'm thinking one of the most important aspects of making the healthy blend work is actually not only being supportive, but being open, answering those questions, even if they're difficult for you to have to figure out the answers to, in order to really fill in the blanks and honor that origin story for them.
Hmm. And this is honestly, the international adoptions have really fallen off, have decreased in the US, and now the greatest number of adoptions is really what they call family, familial family adoptions. So this applies to even if you're in the same family and adopting a child, perhaps a distant relative. I just talked to someone the other day who adopted her very young cousin, and these same guidelines, really would apply. These same practices would really apply in terms of being as honest as we can about the adoption or foster placement or whatever. So even before the concept is understood, I've heard that from other grown children, that they knew that they were adopted even before they understood what adoption meant. But in terms of full disclosure, that really helped them figure out where they stood or why things happened the way they did. And so I think that's very, very important.
So, as we come to the end of our time, as the fire burns down, I'd like you to take a few minutes to speak to a parent that's either begun the process of trying to take on an adopted child and bring them in, or just somebody in general who's working on blending a family. Help them to kind of clarify where to begin to build a healthy
Mhm.
relationship.
So I think one of the first things that parents can do that are thinking about this route, whether it be foster care, adoption, or even if there's stepchildren coming into the mix, is network with other families and widen your circle, whether it be through community or church or school or whatever, but widen your circle to similar families. I learned so much just by maintaining contact with the families that were going through the same things that we were, and it really helped us boost our spirits, provide that sense of community. So that's really the first thing. The second thing is always be reading and doing your research. There's so much online now, and support. There are adoption coaches, there are many groups that get together formally and informally. There's it's just the information out there is just mind-blowing compared to what it was when our family first started the process. And then third, on your journey to connect with the right people, perhaps connect with professionals that are that specialize in the kind of family that you present, whatever that mix will be. There's a saying that every adoption is unique. So by no means am I trying to say do this, do that, it will apply to you, but every adoption is unique. So seek out those professional resources that will help your family within your community, your special set of circumstances or special set of needs. And I think that you'll be glad you did, whether it's one session or we would see a therapist for I don't know, 6, 8, 10 weeks, and then take a break. We had reached some sort of some sort of natural stopping point or understanding, and then a year or two would go by, and we hired a tutor for my daughter to help her with school. Then we hired another therapist or engaged another therapist to work out a few issues a few years later. So every family will have their own mix of issues. So that's my recommendation.
I think the most important part of that is the fact that the journey is unique to you. You know, if you're finding it in your heart to take the journey,
Right.
understand that it's going to be unique for you. It's going to have its own set of challenges, but its own unique set of rewards as well.
Yes, you're exactly right. So I'd like to mention my website. Again, my name is Anna Maria DiDio, and my website is amdidio.com. That's amdidio.com. And on the website, I have a little bit more about our family story, and I have I'm very big on building children's confidence and identity, and I have a real neat affirmation sheet that kids can work through to build their confidence, read through, see what works for them. And then I also have a quiz for fathers. What kind of father are you? So real fun sort of resources on my website. I'd love to stay in touch with any of your listeners interested in blended families.
That was actually where I was going with it. I was gonna set that up with
Okay. I wasn't sure.
So if someone was looking for some very powerful tools to help them connect and build along that unique journey, they definitely need to swing over, pay your website a visit, reach out to you. And you know, one more thing that comes to mind is the fact that life is a journey of learning. And by undergoing this unique trail, you get to help and improve yourself as well.
Yes.
So, you know, those are that's one of the unique rewards about it. And I think actually reaching out, taking advantage of, you know, not only your books but the other resources that you have is something that a lot of people should utilize to reconnect with that childlike curiosity in life. And that's an important part of mindfulness, which not only benefits your family life, but every aspect of your life. And, you know, as we wind this up, I want to thank you for taking the time. This was a pleasure to get to sit down and talk to you for a little bit. I don't believe in the words goodbye. I think they're too final. So until we meet again, whether it's this life or the next, I wish you a safe and prosperous journey.
I enjoyed the campfire. Thank you.
Thank you.